Canonized not too long ago, probably the past 10 years, is Blessed Saint Angelus of Acre. And Angelus had a really, really hard time living religious life. He entered the Capuchin Franciscans and left. He entered again the Capuchins and left. Entered a third time and was so tempted to leave because he just couldn't take the rigor of the life, the discipline of the life. He didn't really want to die to himself as much as he wanted to. And he was just about to leave again when at table they were reading the life of Blessed Bernard of Corleone. He had just been beatified. And so Saint Angelus of Acre, at that moment, in this temptation to abandon his vocation a third time, pleaded for the help of Blessed Bernard of Corleone. And Blessed Bernard of Corleone said to him, "I will be your intercessor and I will help you." And Blessed Angelus after that had the grace to live his Capuchin life to such a degree that he was canonized as saint and became an incredible preacher through the intercession of Bernardo de Corleone, the saint we celebrate today. In 2001, I have the honor of being in St. Peter's Square when Pope John Paul II canonized Blessed Bernardo de Corleone, or Saint Bernardo de Corleone. It was amazing because they hanged the tapestries from the Vatican Basilica, and there was a great preacher, and then there was a great teacher, and this great missionary, and this great somebody else, and there was Bernardo de Corleone's banner with him holding his discipline and his crucifix. This humble lay brother who couldn't even read was canonized among these incredible great saints who did such great things. And what did Bernardo do his whole life, according to the world? Nothing. He really didn't do much when it came to any great thing. He did no great missionary work. He did no great preaching. He did no great teaching. He did no great work with the poor. His greatness was in his nothingness, and in his littleness, and in his lowliness. His family, he was born in 1605, and so during that time in Sicily was ruled by the Spanish. And his family was quite devout, even though they were from the city of Corleone, made famous by the movie The Godfather. The family of Bernardo's family were very, very devout people. And they were known as the Santa Familia, the Holy Family, because they were so caring for the poor in the neighborhood. They took care of people, and they were known to defend the poor when their rights were being overrun, and so they were considered to be a very holy family. And Bernardo caught that. He caught that love of the poor. He caught that charity. However, he had a bit of an anger problem, a bit of a rage problem, and he could not get his anger and rage under control. He was from Sicily. What do you expect? He was from the town of Corleone. Corleone means heart of the lion, right? And he truly had a lion's heart, Bernard. And Bernard, so amazingly, he had to channel his anger and he became an incredible swordsman. And by the time he was a teenager, he was known as the fastest sword in all of Sicily. And he had quite a number of duels. And in one of these duels, he wounded somebody, or something happened. Anyway, they came looking for him, and he wound up maiming somebody so bad that he destroyed him inside when he realized what he had done to this man. He was trying to defend the poor and so forth, but he really just realized how bad his temper was, that he could hurt somebody so bad. He did eventually apologize to the man, make restitution for what he had done to him, and they actually became friends. But still, there was that sense inside of himself that he had to control this anger, this rage. He wasn't going to get to heaven like this. And he needed to convert. He needed to change. And he needed to do penance if he was ever going to get control of his rage and anger, if he was ever going to focus his life truly towards God. So at 26 years old, he abandons the world and he becomes a Capuchin friar. And he moves around from friary to friary, but he does one basic thing his whole life. For 36 years, almost 40 years, he's the cook. He's the friary cook. That's his job. That's what he does for the next 36 years of his life. That and the laundry. So how did a man who just simply did cooking and doing laundry become such a great saint? Aren't you supposed to do some great work of mercy to become a saint? It'd be like Mother Teresa, or it'd be like Jose Maria Escrivá, or some great preacher out there. No. Sanctity does not depend upon the greatness of our works. Sanctity depends upon the greatness of our interior life. It's not the great things we do out there, but the great things we do in here. When the church is examining your life, they don't look at all the wonderful works that you did. They don't look for the wonderful miracles that you did. The first thing the church looks for when they investigate whether or not you should be a saint is, did you live the virtues heroically? Did you have heroic faith, heroic charity, heroic hope, and so forth? Did you live it heroically? Did you reach beatitude? Right? Did you reach beatitude? Did you become an intimate lover of God? Did you purge from your life that which, all venial sin, all mortal sin, all attachment to mortal sin, all attachment to venial sin? That's what the church looks for first. Then they'll look at the other stuff that you may have done. Because the devil can imitate those works. What he can imitate is virtue and holiness, particularly humility, which Bernardo had to the nth degree. He did, in fact, conquer himself. He turned his sword from against others to himself, a spiritual sword. And he fought that vice. He fought that attachment. Particularly, he fought as anger. Someone told the story once, and I have yet to read about it, but supposedly at one point, in trying to control his anger as a young friar, he stood before the cross with his fist clenched and his teeth girt and his gums were bleeding, to control that within himself. And eventually he did conquer it to such a degree. He was known for his gentleness. He was known for his kindness. He was known for his incredible generosity. One day one of the friars was sick and he wanted to make him a good meal to get him better. So he went off and he begged from this nice family a really nice chicken. And he brought the chicken home and he broke its neck, and he was getting he hadn't plucked it yet. And he's getting this hot water ready to make a nice stew, and the superior came in and said, "What are you doing?" And he told him, he says, "You can't, I don't want you with these expensive chickens. We're poor friars. Don't give that back to that family." So he brought the chicken back to the family, and then when he gave the chicken back and his neck broke, and they said, "Thank you." They're a little weirded out by it, but then all of a sudden the chicken pulled its head up and it was restored to life. And so they named the chicken Bernardo. And so again, started laying eggs again. But he had this incredible gift of holiness in his care for souls. He had a particular devout love for the Holy Eucharist. Whenever he was done in the kitchen, he went right back to the chapel. He never wanted to leave Jesus alone in the tabernacle. Whenever something was stopped, he ran back to the church. At night, he would wait until one of the brothers got up to pray before he'd go back to bed, because he never wanted to leave Jesus alone. He just loved the Blessed Sacrament so much. And he loved Our Lady so deeply. He had such a devout love of Our Lady. He started the little tradition when the Capuchin cooks was to have the image of Our Lady in the kitchen, a little shrine to Our Lady where he put flowers out on her feast days or herbs to make it smell nice, It was a little sanctuary he had in the kitchen to Our Lady that became a Capuchin tradition from Bernardo of Corleone, to have a little sanctuary in the kitchen to the Blessed Mother. But he was very devoted to her. Above all of his devotions, though, was his devotion to the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. In all the various friaries he lived in, they asked him which ones were his favorites. He said whichever one had the nicest crucifix. Because that's where he would spend a lot of his time, was before the crucifix, meditating upon the passion of our Lord. And he would engross himself in the passion that he would have a desire then to do penance, to enter into the sufferings of Christ. Not just the penance for his own past sins, but to take upon himself the penance of those who were committing sin, to bring about the conversion of sinners, to merit the grace of conversion for sinners. The passion drew him into a desire to suffer for Christ, and suffer he did. One time he was suffering so bad, the doctors gave him 5 days to live, and he crawled his way to the chapel and took off the altar the statue of St. Francis and shoved it into his sleeve. And he said to St. Francis, "You're going to stay there until you cure me." Well, he was miraculously cured. And the doctor said, "How did this happen? What medicine did you take?" And he pulled St. Francis out of his sleeve and said, "He cured me." And so he just, he had this beautiful way about him. And he wanted to read, because he wanted to read about the passion of Jesus. And so he'd hear the brothers talk about St. Bonaventure's writing on the crucifixion of Jesus, and he wanted to be able to read the office of the Passion. So he was trying so hard to learn how to read. He was struggling so much. And one day at prayer, our Lord Jesus Christ said to him, "Bernardo, isn't my crucifixion enough for you? Isn't meditating my passion sufficient? You don't need to read." And kind of relieved him of his struggle to suffer, to read. Our Lord relieved that suffering for him, and he gave him peace that he couldn't read. It was okay, because he was going to study the cross, which, was what Saint Bonaventure had said himself, that when Saint Thomas Aquinas visited him and asked Saint Bonaventure, "Where's your library?" he pointed to the crucifix and said, "That's my library." And that was true for Bernard of Corleone. The crucifix was his library. He had this incredible penance that he drew from the cross, and he would always eat a piece of bread. He would dunk it in a little bit of oil and whatever, but he was always like the mangy food, And one day he was ordered by his superiors to eat a good meal because there were all these people there and they didn't want to see him sitting there eating this crappy meal. So after he was a little upset that he had such a nice meal, and so our Lord appeared to him. And our Lord Jesus Christ took a piece of the bread that he would eat normally. He took it and he dipped it into the precious blood flowing from his side and fed it to Bernard. And Bernard had this beautiful mystical experience of just this beautiful moment of just ecstasy in God, having received the precious blood from the side of our Lord with the bread that was dipped in it, that he would normally eat at meal. It's the way our Lord consoled him. He truly became a lover of God in such a profound way. But most remarkably was his life of penance. That was his great work, was actually entering into, from his meditation on the Passion, he wanted to enter into the sufferings of Christ. He understood the power of penance, the power of suffering. We all know the theology of penance. United to Christ, we can enter into the passion of Christ, and so offer ourselves with the Son to the Father and draw down grace. He understood that. And he wanted to enter into that more and more. The more he meditated, the more he wanted to enter into it. The more he thought of the Passion, the more he wanted to hang upon the cross with Christ. One can possibly get the image of Christ crucified with the points of the nail pointing out in the back of the crucifix. And you can almost see Bernard impaling himself on the back of the cross in order to hang there with Christ because he wanted to participate in the redemption of souls. The call to penance is part of our Francis life. It's part of our Catholic life. And Our Lady at Fatima said over and over again to do penance, the need for penance. Penance for the end of the war, penance for the conversion of sinners, penance that all souls go to hell, penance for reparation for the sins against the Immaculate Mary and the Sacred Heart of Jesus, penance for the Holy Father. Over and over again she called us to penance. And even Our Lady of Lourdes, the only real words we have recorded from Our Lady, other than she wanted a chapel built there while she had the sufferings of the people, it was penance, penance, penance. And even the apparition of the angel at Fatima, the fiery sword, coming down to set the world on fire. And Our Lady holds back the sword of the angel. The angel points to the earth and says, "Penance, penance, penance." This is part of our Christian life. It's the way we enter into the Passion, not begrudgingly, not, "Oh, I gotta do penance. Oh, it's Lent. Oh, I gotta fast for those nice cookie cream pies." No, we enter into it, embrace it with love, with joy, with devotion. We will it. Will it because it is something good, something beautiful, something holy, something sacred. And that's something that Bernard of Corleone understood. Suffering became sacred when God suffered and made it sacred and gifted it to us as a way in which we ourselves can now participate in the Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ. Today I would just ask you perhaps to reflect upon these little tidbits of the life of Bernardo de Corleone, but particularly his love of the Passion of Christ. And ask ourselves, how deep is my devotion to the Passion of Christ? How often do I spend time meditating upon the crucifixion of our Lord, on his 7 last words, on him being nailed to the cross, or his scourging, or him struggling to breathe, or the beautiful act of his love as he hangs upon the cross, dying for love of us? Do I meditate upon the love that he has for me, his thirst for me, that he did this for love of me, that he did this for love of the most wretched of sinners, to find that lost sheep, to find that lost coin, to find that lost soul, to obtain the grace of conversion. As we meditate upon the Passion, the death and suffering of our Lord, let us consider deeply the intensity of our Lord's love for us. And let us also consider our willingness to enter into his passion, to hang upon the cross with him in order to obtain the conversion of sinners, to obtain graces for souls, to obtain every grace that we may stand most in need of, obtain the reparation for our past sins, to be able to make true restitution for our past sins. We may understand the depth and mystery of penance, that we may understand the depth and the mystery of the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. May God bless you. Merry keeping. Amen.